Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of fall camp intel. Not too much stuff coming out from fall camp right about now, but as we all know, it's a zero-sum game, so we won't really know until pads hit in about 13 days here. And let's jump into that. Let's talk about all the games that are coming up in week 0 and week 1. We'll talk about one week 0 game, the one you can imagine, Farmageddon over there in Dublin, and then we got a lot of week 1 games. It is about as good of a week 1 as you will find probably in college football history, if I'm being totally honest. So let's jump into this, and I think we got to start with week 0. We got to start in Dublin. Iowa State, Kansas State. Farmageddon going on over there in Ireland. Frankly, I cannot wait to see some of those fans get over there because I think they're cut from the similar cloth. I think they're going to enjoy themselves at pubs all around Dublin heading up to this game. But as for the game, I think this will eliminate someone from the Big 12 title. And that sounds crazy because obviously mathematically it's not going to get anywhere close to eliminating someone from the Big 12 championship. But when I look at these two teams, I look at two teams that have every chance to get to the Big 12 championship. I just saw that I believe it was Iowa State had a big time injury. No, I'm sorry. It was Baylor had a big time injury at running back. We will get to that here in a second. But Iowa State, Kansas State. It just feels like a hugely important game. I think both these teams are in a conference that it's going to be really tough to come out of there with anything less than 2 conference losses. That means one of these is going to be huge. If Kansas State ends up winning this one, you've got one huge check mark in terms of teams that have the ability to beat you in this conference that could keep you from that mark that now you're able to top and move on and have a little bit more leeway as you head into a ridiculous conference down the stretch. So Iowa State, kind of the same exact thing here. I think it's going to be really interesting in this game because I think whoever loses this one, you can go ahead and knock out of the Big 12 championship race. Obviously, they could find their way back in mathematically. I just don't see either of these teams finding their way through this schedule without a couple of losses here and there. Got to get the first one. Got to make sure that couple of losses doesn't become, you better only lose one game the rest of the way. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch, but when you get down to the actual nuts and bolts of this game, Avery Johnson against Rocco Becht. 2 experienced, really fun guys. Rocco Becht a little bit more known of a commodity as of right now, but Avery Johnson as fun as it gets at the quarterback position. Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson for Kansas State in the backfield. You got Abu Sama and Carson Hansen in the other backfield. So it is going to be a run versus run type game. There's no doubt about that. You can imagine it's probably going to be decided by a couple of big-time plays through the air. And we'll talk about that more as we get into a little bit of a preview for this one. But I think this one's going to be really important. When we get to the end of the year in the Big 12, I think one of these teams is going to look back on this game and say, if we just made that one field goal, if we picked off that one pass, we might just be in Dallas right now, but we're at the end of the day, we're at home. I think it's going to be a hugely important game that kicks off a ridiculous conference in 2025. TCU in North Carolina, one that a lot of people are going to watch on that Monday night. It's going to be really fun to watch these two teams go at it because Bill Belichick is at UNC for the first time. It's going to be really interesting to watch this one. There's no doubt about that for a number of reasons. Just how UNC goes about business, how everything works out. Is his girlfriend on the sideline? I think is something people are interested in. But at the end of the day, on the other side, you do have Josh Hoover, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the entire country, a guy that can make all types of plays for the Horned Frogs, and someone that I really think could lead them to a Big 12 title, maybe even the CFP this upcoming year. So a very talented group over there at TCU, and a group that might be being overlooked just a little bit in the Big 12. And then over at UNC, you got Gio Lopez coming in from South Alabama at quarterback. Very talented kid, UNC. They have some dudes here and there. I like the group. I don't necessarily love the group by any means. I think they are going to be the less talented team in this game, but I think it's going to be a game that's going to be hugely important. You know, if North Carolina doesn't get this one, I think it could be a little bit of a tumbling season at times. I think if TCU doesn't get this one, they could be in a really tough spot heading into the Big 12 games that are going to be a lot similar to this one, maybe even a little bit tougher than this one. So going to be an awesome one to watch. Obviously, people will have quite a few opinions about Bill Belichick at the end of this one, but in my eyes, I think it's a must-win for TCU. I think North Carolina, you just got to show that you can be able to show up, and then if you get the win, then all is better. Staying in the ACC just a little bit here, Virginia Tech at South Carolina, one of those ACC versus SEC games that are going to be really interesting in week 1, and it's 2 quarterbacks that I just cannot wait to watch. Kyron Drones and Lenore Sellers are two of the most athletic players in the country, full stop. It doesn't matter what position you're talking about, doesn't matter what skill set you're talking about. These guys can do it all. They're such remarkable players. It sounds like Kyron Drones is finally healthy. Now, that doesn't usually last too long, but at least in the first game, it sounds like he's coming in as healthy as can be. They also added Terrion Stewart from Bowling Green last year. If you haven't looked this kid up, look him up. He's downright terrifying in Virginia Tech, a team that everyone was huge on last year. I had him in my ACC title last year. Maybe we were a year early on the Hokies, and they put it together this year. Obviously, South Carolina needs this one. There's no doubt about that. South Carolina's coming off a year where they made a big-time statement, especially down the stretch. You got to be able to follow it up, and that's a very tough thing to do, but Lenora Sellers has everything in front of him. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show, but really talented quarterbacks in this game. I like to think South Carolina can handle business, but we'll talk about that one when it gets a little bit closer. Virginia Tech is going to be an interesting team this upcoming year. Colorado, Georgia Tech, a game that has two very different teams involved as far as I'm concerned. Georgia Tech is a team that I feel like I know what they're going to be this year. I don't know if they're going to, make the CFP or be a 10-win team or a 9-win team. What I'm saying is I know how they're going to go about business. I know they're going to play solid football. I know the bottom's really not going to fall out because of the quarterback situation between Haynes King and then Aaron Philo backing him up. It's going to be a solid team. Colorado, I have no earthly idea. Your guess is as good as mine. Whether it's Caden Salter or it's Juju Lewis at quarterback, I think it's going to be Caden Salter. But at the end of the day, I have no idea. I think they have difference makers at wide receiver in Jerlon Miller and a couple other guys there. I think they did a good job in the portal, but also lost some big-time names in the portal. It's going to be a fascinating game. There's no doubt about that. I think Georgia Tech is one of the more known commodities. I think Colorado is one of the more unknown commodities, as we've come to find over the last couple of years. But it's going to be a really awesome game, one of those that I think is hugely important for both teams. If they want to have a successful year this year, Georgia Tech, obviously a little bit more expectation, is favored in this game on the road, so we'll see what happens there, but cannot wait for that one to get underway, and I think whoever wins this one could be a little bit of a dark horse in their specific conference. Then you got Auburn at Baylor, one of those games that just feels like everyone's forgetting about on that Thursday night, the same night as Georgia Tech, Colorado, and Auburn's a slight favorite in this one. Auburn needs this one, plain and simple. There are a lot of teams that need week one wins, and maybe Kansas State, Iowa State stand a little bit alone because it's a conference game, but in terms of out-of-conference games, it has to be a win for Auburn in this one. If they lose this one, I think the wheels could fall off very quickly. I think you could see Deuce Knight very early in the season, and I think you could see another team that is very talented, that does a lot of good things on offense and defense, but makes just way too many mistakes to win big-time games. For Baylor, I think you have a little bit more wiggle room. There's no doubt about that. You did just lose, now I'm blanking on the name, and I really do apologize, Dawson Pendergast. There he is. Dawson Pendergast is a very talented running back for you. Bryson Washington, incredible. Absolutely a guy that can carry the load, but that duo was as formidable as you're going to find in the country. Obviously lost a huge piece there, but it's going to be a really fun game. Jackson Arnold has all the talent in the world around him. He has plenty of talent in him. I think the confidence level is going to be the big-time question here. For Baylor, you know what you have. You know you have Sawyer Robertson, one of the other most underrated quarterbacks in the entire country, a guy that can run it and pass it. I think he's going to be a huge player, and I think it's going to be a huge matchup for Auburn and for Baylor, really. I think both these teams are looking at this year and saying, why not us in our conference? Obviously, Auburn might have a little bit bigger of a climb to make, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be an awesome game to watch, and two teams that really need this one just to get a little bit of momentum behind them throughout this season. Syracuse at Tennessee, quote-unquote, over there in Atlanta on August 30th, going to be incredible to watch this one unfold for so many different reasons. Both these teams very interested in what they look like after last year. Obviously an incredible year for Syracuse, where they added a guy like Kyle McCord in, brought him to places that I don't know if they thought they were going to be able to do in year one with Fran Brown, but were able to do some incredible things. Steve Angeli is coming in likely as the starter. Ricky Collins also came in from LSU, very talented kid, but I do think it's going to be Steve Angeli against Joey Aguilar, and that'll be really interesting to watch how they kind of take into these offenses and how things are going. I think Syracuse done a really good job through the portal. They added Jonte Cook after kind of a weird spring for Jonte Cook. Found him in the portal, a very, very talented kid that if you can get everything out of him, he's going to be maybe your number one receiver this year. And then Deuce Chestnut, getting him back from LSU was huge. I think Tennessee is in a position where you probably got to win this one. Not to say Tennessee, fans are totally going to be unbelievably angry if they lose or if the season doesn't go perfectly, because I think they understand that when you lost Nico, some things changed about this team, and there are some other things going on that make me plenty nervous about this team. When is Jermod McCoy going to be able to play? Probably not in this game, and a couple of different things there. But overall, I think Tennessee's got to be able to win this one. They're favored by 14.5. Syracuse losing a lot of players, but Fran Brown wants that big win. And if he can get this one in week one, they might be tumbling downhill over there in the ACC, which would be really fun to watch. And Tennessee would be really interesting to watch at the very least. I think Josh Heupel has about as much good faith as you could have built up in that fan base, but it can go bad pretty quickly. So that's an interesting one for a number of different reasons. Two teams that would very much like to make a statement that they're still here after a very interesting offseason for both. It'll be awesome to watch this one unfold, and Fran Brown's always fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. Alabama at Florida State, a game that I think a lot of people are confused by. I think a lot of people are going in saying Alabama's going to dominate. Alabama returns a lot of really talented players, and then there's some people saying that the quarterback's not going to work out, and Florida State's going to be able to flip a switch and be able to get right back to where they were. I tend to lean the Alabama direction, if I'm being totally honest. Obviously, I'll pick that game when it gets a little bit closer, but I think you're in the position for Florida State. Just hang in this one. Just make sure at halftime we don't look up and see Alabama 35-0, or we don't see just dominating performance from Alabama all the way through, because then Mike Norvell might be in a little bit of trouble a little bit earlier than he thought. Now, the buyout's going to be a nightmare, so I don't think he's getting fired mid-season, but it's just to say Florida State is one of the most fragile teams in the entire country to me in terms of this first week. If it doesn't go your way, you lose 42-0. You could lose that locker room like they did last year, and things get really, really bad again. So something to watch there. We'll find out if it's going to be a little bit more of a toss-up game than I'm thinking right now. As I look at it right this second, it's more, can Florida State just show up and at least be competitive? Notre Dame at Miami, a game that is really, really weird, because you have a quarterback coming in from one side, whether it's CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, another kind of quarterback battle that seems to be a little bit tighter than we thought. I think it's going to be CJ Carr, but we'll find out officially when this game comes, against one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the country, in Carson Beck, coming over. Obviously not too experienced in this system, but a very experienced quarterback nonetheless, and Notre Dame will have the best player on the field, and Jeremiah Love, that running back. We will talk about him a little bit later in the show in this next segment, but overall, I think you look at this game, Notre Dame's defense is going to be really tough to beat. Now, they did lose some big-time players this past offseason. Miami's offensive line is one of the best in the country. It's going to be a lot to deal with. I can almost promise you that. They are going to play outright man coverage. They are going to dare Carson Beck to throw into tight windows, and it could lead to a couple of mistakes like it did last year for Carson Beck. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. I don't think it's a must-win for Miami by any means. I think their season is still very much alive. If you get blown out of the water, then things get a little bit sketchy. And then for Notre Dame, you lose this one, then your CFP hopes are on life support pretty much immediately again this year. So they were able to kind of drag themselves out of it last year. This one might be a little bit tougher with some of the games you got coming up after this one. So I think another one where Notre Dame's probably got to win this one if they want to make the CFP this year. If Miami does win this one, then they might just be the team that's going to challenge Clemson for the ACC. Let's talk about Clemson just a little bit here. The battle for Death Valley, as some people are calling it, with some of the talk that has been going on between these two teams. Clemson is favored by 4.5 as of right now. It's going to be an awesome one. In my opinion, these are the two best quarterbacks in the entire country, in Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik. Garrett Nussmeier is likely to play in this game. I don't think there's any huge worries about that. And two streaks just have to end in this one. Dabo Swinney's lost 3 straight games to SEC opponents, lost every one last year. Those are the 3 that they lost. And then Brian Kelly, you're 0-5 at LSU in week 1s. You got to find a way to get a win here. And obviously, it's a very, very tall order. You're placing a ton on the offensive line against one of the better defensive lines in the country against Clemson. it's going to be a tall order. There's no doubt about that. But I think when I look at this game, I think both these teams don't necessarily need it. I think whichever team gets it might be on their way to winning their conference, to getting to the CFP. Maybe if it's Clemson's case, maybe being an undefeated team at the end of the year. There's a lot of things that could happen after this game, but something's got to give. Either it's going to be LSU plays better in week one than they have in the past, or Clemson finally gets over the SEC hump that has really plagued them in the years past. So it's going to be an awesome game. Two of the best quarterbacks in the country going at it, and just cannot wait for that nightcap in Death Valley. Texas at Ohio State, the one that caps them all, the one that everyone is going to be watching for a million different reasons. Whether you hate Ohio State or you hate Texas or you want to see Arch Manning fail or you want to see him succeed, there's going to be plenty of reasons to watch this game. Arch Manning obviously is going to be the guy that starts out for Texas. I think it's going to be Julian Sayin for Ohio State. Could very well be Lincoln Kindhold. So something to watch there as we get a little bit closer. But Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs, the two best players in the country, as far as I'm concerned. Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill, not far behind him. On the defensive side of the ball for Texas, Ryan Wingo, I think, is going to be as good as it gets when you talk about wide receivers this year. Elite versus elite, rematch of the Cotton Bowl a year ago that came down to the wire. Obviously, it was a 14-point game at the end of it. That scoop and score by Jack Sawyer did a lot of help there. But as far as I'm concerned, this is college football nirvana. Everyone talks about college football kicking off at noon on Saturday, week one. You get two of the best teams in the country. You get a rematch from a year ago that could have very well decided the national champion a year ago. You get two of the quarterbacks that everyone cannot wait to watch. You get two of the best players in the country, the two best players in the country, as far as I'm concerned, over there on that Ohio State side. It's about as good as it gets. I don't think either of these teams both of these teams, can lose this game and still be in the CFP battle. This one's all about pride. I think all of these players are going to come into this one raring to go, really excited, especially on the Texas side, but even on the Ohio State side, Jeremiah Smith obviously has been talking a little bit better of a game than he had last time. Only had one catch last time against Texas, so obviously is looking for a little bit bigger of a game there. It's going to be incredible in every sense of the word. I think this one's special, and I think it could be a game that we're talking about a lot throughout the season and maybe throughout Arch Manning's career the rest of the time if he can put on a show up there in Columbus. But it's an incredible week one. I don't think I've ever seen a week one that really tops this one. Cannot wait to see how all this unfolds and how it kind of affects conversations the rest of the way in the college football season because, as we all know, week one is not the end-all be-all, but can very well be brought up in that CFP room when you're making decisions between conferences, between teams. It can get a little bit important. Now, I don't think anyone has to win in week one, except for maybe Auburn, but at the end of the day, we'll get into all of that in more depth as it gets a little bit closer. Just had to talk about it because I could not wait to talk about it. But let's take a little bit of a break here. When we come back, I got 10 Heisman hopefuls for you. I got the 10 guys that I am dubbing my guys, I suppose, as we go into the Heisman conversation. We'll not make an official pick here, but we'll rank them as I see it right now, right after this. So stick with us.